Term series right now on what I've called sharing the good news, which is about evangelism, and I've particularly called it evangelism as a lifestyle. The book that I referenced last week, and I would recommend that you check it out if you get a chance, and there are a number of these kinds of books, but the one that I am most indebted to is a book by a guy named Joe Aldrich, which is Lifestyle Evangelism. And he is the one who has coined the term long-term, low-pressure, soft-sell friendship evangelism, meaning that we build relationships. We build relationships of integrity with people around us, whether they are believers or not. And there are multiple examples in the New Testament of believers who had friendships with people who were not believers. It is okay for a believer to have a friendship with a non-believer, or to have multiple friendships with multiple non-believers. Now, I know that we all want to be very, very careful. We want to make sure that the influencers in our life are people that are going to influence us in the right direction, in the direction for serving God and loving Jesus and that sort of stuff. And there's no question that's important. That's especially important for our young people. We want to make sure that our young people are not easily sort of dragged off, if you will, in a direction that is not spiritually beneficial to them. So I understand that. But the full picture of the New Testament is that we should have relationships of integrity, that I don't befriend unbelievers just to try to bring them to Jesus, and then after a month or 6 months or a year or 2 years, I finally say, well, obviously that's not going to work. I'm going to walk away from this relationship and try somebody else. It's the fact that we ought to be friends with people who are non-believers, with the idea that we're going to be friends. We want them to come to Christ. We want them to come to Jesus. We want them to trust Him as their Lord and Savior. But even if they don't, they will still be our friend. That's a very, very important thing. In fact, we as Christians sometimes have a reputation for being rather disingenuous, being rather manipulative of people, sort of forcing them into believing this or believing that, or pressuring them. And that's not a good thing. It's important that we have these kinds of relationships. And so we're going to look at some passages in the next few Sundays that give us some advice, some assistance in that direction. Now, having said that, I realize that nothing is more scary than sharing your faith with someone who is not a believer. I have found I love to use the phrase, whoever I'm talking to, okay? I'll give you a hint from time to time on this. I love to use the phrase, the Lord willing. Very simple, very non-threatening, but it kind of puts it out there. So if I'm having a conversation with someone who is not a Christian, and they say, well, you going on vacation this summer or what? And I say, well, we decided this year that we wanted to, we've been blessed. Our son and daughter-in-law are going to send us on a little cruise for Christmas, right? They're not paying all of it, but they're paying a good part of it, that's for sure, and I'm very, very appreciative. Yes, I know you're jealous. Too bad. Okay, you're not coming, okay? Your sister already tried to get 20% out of me. You're not. No, I'm kidding. So I'll get an opportunity to say to people, where are you going on vacation? And I'll say, well, we're going on a cruise at the end of December, Lord willing. And I just leave it at that. I don't get all, hoity-toity or hot and bothered or arrogant or preachy, right? Most people don't like being preached to. I remember I heard some pastors when I was growing up, and, it seemed like the more a pastor yelled, the more impressive it was. Now, I remember when we went from having microphones here, where you had to stand right here the whole time, okay? And then there were times when, then there was a microphone, what they call a lavalier microphone, put around your neck on a cord. There's a big, long cord, and you had to be careful when you're walking around to make sure that you didn't trip, Now we've gone wireless. I remember the church that my wife and I used to attend when I was a seminary student in Grand Rapids. We had a guy there that was preaching one Sunday, and he was Warren Van Ryan. Remember Warren? Warren was using the wireless mic. And this was in the early stages of that technology. And he was trying to preach, but meantime, the wireless signal was picking up the local rock station. It wasn't really loud, but it was kind of an interesting background to what he was trying to say. And he was very aware of that, and I remember Warren saying, you can turn this thing off, because this was all brand new technology. You can turn this thing off, because I don't want to hear that stuff, For me, it depends on what the music is. It might be a song I like from back then. But the fact is, preaching has changed because technology has changed. Charles Haddon Spurgeon, the great English preacher, pastored at Metropolitan Tabernacle in London, used to say that if this is back in Spurgeon's day, if a man does not have a barrel chest that he can boom out loud, he should really question whether or not he's been called to the ministry. Okay? Yeah, that's a really odd qualification, isn't it? So, but it's not about preaching down, it's about relating to people. And, Jesus does this so remarkably well. We looked at the story of the woman at the well. I want to, I think, do a sermon on that topic, on that passage as part of this series. And to just encourage you. I also would like to encourage you to come and see me. I'd love to have, from time to time, if you've had an experience this week where you actually had a chance to share your faith with someone, I'd love to have you get up, if you'd love to just share briefly how that went, so that we know that we're doing this. We're not just sitting and listening to somebody talk about it. We're actually out there trying to do it. And I'm blessed in a way. I teach at a Christian college. The kid that empties my trash and all that sort of stuff in my office, which I'm never there when he does because he works at night. But everybody that's around me is a professing believer. When I come here, it's a professing believer. I used to referee basketball for about 30 years, and I always liked doing that for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons I enjoyed doing it was that I had a chance to be around people who were just very, what I used to call, and don't misunderstand the term here, very transparent pagans. They were just out there. I've gone to the golf course here up at the community college during the summer, and I've played golf there, and I've met up with a couple of groups of guys, and we start chatting, and it's like, well, what do you do? And I say, well, during the school year, I teach at Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids, but year-round, in the summertime, we move here to Muskegon. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church in Muskegon here. And many times their reaction is always sort of like, well, I guess I better watch my language then, So if you have friends who are not Christians and they're sort of intimidated by you, then you haven't gotten to the point in that friendship that you need to be. Okay? Like you and I were having a conversation this morning about the fellow you were talking about, sort of just having that relationship, working on that for 8 or 9 years now, you said. And that's